What is up, Scrub Fam? Pat here, back with the final part of our Set 9 limited review. Today we're going to talk about the black cards, the multicolor cards, the reboot leaders, and the iconic attack rares. So yes, there's a lot to cover, so I'm going to try and move at a relatively brisk pace so that way you guys can get everything in. This is going to be a much longer video than usual, and I know these videos usually are kind of long, but yeah, this is definitely something you want to listen to when you have a lot of time or you're on a long car drive or a commute. This will get you prepared for your Set 9 pre-releases, which start tomorrow. If you guys missed any of the previous parts, which is red, blue, green, or yellow cards, I will link them down in the description below. Got to give a shout out to the sponsors first. Alec Pastrana over at beardedcollectibles.com, best shop owner on the planet. Going to give you guys the best prices on Set 9 sealed product. Also, shout out to the homie Daylon Mack, Tournament of Power, Las Vegas, February 21st weekend. Going to be the best 3 days for Dragon Ball Super Card game in a very long time. If you can afford it, definitely consider going. I will link the registration down below along with Bearded Collectibles link. Alright guys, let us just jump right into it. So, black cards. Bibbidi, again, leader quality is really high. Bibbidi is interesting because you're like, okay, I have to have no hand to awaken this guy, and every turn he just makes me want to discard my entire hand. That seems counterintuitive, but you can't deck out in limited. Right, so that's already a plus. On top of that, you know, even though he requires black cards for a lot of his key cards, some of them are not color restricted. So what I'm trying to say is, in a really roundabout way, Bibbidi is the leader that you choose if you have a pile, an absolute pile. So I'm going to give Bibbidi an 8, and I'll explain to you why. If your sealed pool is just garbage and you can't assemble anything, but you open Bibbidi leader, just put a bunch of good stuff cards in the deck, select Bibbidi, combo away everything and awaken it right away. And then what you're going to do on the backside with Majin Buu is every turn you're just going to pitch everything for your activate main to make your leader gigantic. There are so few actual negates in the format that this strategy will actually push through for some relevant damage some of the time. It's not the best, but at the same time, it's still a pretty solid strategy. And he does still have the fact that he can remove things 3 or less, which is most of the problematic commons and uncommons in the format. So that is definitely a huge plus. Again, leader quality is so high in this set. So yeah, Majin Buu, don't sleep on it. Don't think it's a bad leader. Next up is Dabura. Dabura is basically a negate with a body. He's not as good as a raw negate, but it is basically a 3-cost 15k that goes in any deck that when you counterplay him, you get to stop an attack, which can potentially save your life. So for that reason, I'm going to give Dabura a 7. Next up is Yakon, Light Devour. If you are in the Bibbidi pile strategy, this card is basically an 8 because it's a 20k swing and then a 30k swing. And there's no real repercussions because you're basically dumping your hand to do it. If you are not in that strategy, then this card's closer to like a 3. It's pretty low. You're basically just throwing away your hand to try to win the game in a bid, like a desperation bid. So it's not the best there. Again, this is something you want to stick with only if you are in Bibbidi. Next up is Pui Pui, Devious Disruptor. 2-drop 15k in black means it's really good everywhere. It's playable. It's also got Barrier, which makes it slightly above cut compared to a standard 2-drop. The permanent ability is not super relevant. It's only going to work if you're in the Bibbidi pile strategy, and there's so few counterplays anyway in the format that I just don't see it being much better than its default grade, which is a 6 basically all around. Spopovich and Yamu. 2-drop 20ks are great. Obviously it doesn't have any combo power since it's black, so it's a 0/0. But since it's splashable in everything, every deck should play this. And I'm going to give Spopovich and Yamu a 7, just a solid beater on 2 for every deck. We're going to just do Bobbidi and Bibbidi at the exact same time. Both of these have the restriction of if all of your energy is black to get their effect. That's not happening. There's no world where you open 40 black cards in a pre-release sealed pool. There's no world where you get 40 black cards in a draft. It's just not happening. So for that reason, I'm going to give both of these cards a 1. Just don't play them. Now, I know what you're saying, but at least they have combo power. Well, almost every card in the set has combo power. These cards don't even give you color fixing, which is, you know, another knock against them. Next up, we have Kid Buu. Kid Buu is a 6-drop 20k. It can't be removed from your battle area due to skills, which is obviously nice, and your opponent can't draw outside of their leader effect, which is also nice. 6 is quite a steep cost, and 20k for that is pretty bad. It does have this activate battle, pay 3 to give it 10k in triple strike though, which makes it a really solid finisher, and every deck can play this because it's black. And then also, as you're about to see with most of the boo cards that we're going to talk about, there are ways to cheat this guy into play relatively quickly, like somewhere around anywhere between turns 3 and 5, which makes him a solid inclusion, I feel like, in a lot of decks for that are looking for a finisher. So I'm going to give Kid Boo a 7. Next up is Buhan. This is a 5-drop, 25k double strike, and you can't play it if you have 2 or less energy. That's irrelevant. You're never going to use that. You're basically hard casting this for 5 to be a 25k double strike as a top end finisher in every deck. It's a pretty solid inclusion because many decks are looking for higher end stuff, and this card being a common means you're likely to get maybe 2 of them in a pre-release, and it is again a really high end finisher, and it has this upside of if you happen to have other Majin Boos, you can swap into them later on in the game after you dump your hand, say with this Buhan, and you don't win and you need more attacks to reload to try and win the game, then you can definitely do that with this Activate Me. I'm going to give Buhan an 8. I think it is a really strong common that you should put in every deck at the top end. Next up is Bootanks. This is very much the exact same card as the Buhan we just talked about, only it has critical instead of double strike. I know I say critical is the best keyword in all of Limited, but when it's on like a 5 or a 6 drop, unless that thing has double strike or triple strike, it's not quite as good. You usually want to get a lot of crits in early. When we get to turn 5 or later, that's when we're starting to, thinking about double strike to finish the game or triple strike to finish the game. So I think that's a knock against this card. So I'm going to give Bootanks a 7. I would still probably include it in most of my decks as a top end finisher. Next up is Majin Buu Steadfast Absorption, which is, I guess, Bukalo, I think is how the kids pronounce it. So it's a 4-drop 15k, which is terrible stat line, as we've already discussed in previous videos. But it does have dual attack, which is somewhat of a saving grace. And it has the upside of actually being able to be played or like go into the other Majin Boos that we previously talked about, such as Kid Buu, Buhan, Bootanks. So that is a big plus for it. I would give this card somewhere between a 6 and a 7. The actual 54 drop for a 15k dual attack is not super enthusiastic in my mind, but if you do have the other Majin Buu cards, it's definitely closer to a 7 and a higher 7 at that, just because being able to play this card and get 2 swings in and go into one of these 3 Majin Boos that we already talked about is really powerful and puts on a lot of pressure. I wish this card wasn't a rare, so that way you could do it more reliably, but again, I would definitely probably consider including this in every deck just for the option. Next up is Majin Buu Supreme Absorption. I believe this is Super Buu. It's a 4-drop 15k. Again, terrible rate. Has evolved for 3 on top of any of your Majin Boos to kill any of your opponent's battle cards, ignoring barrier. That's really strong. And there are some good Majin Boos that I can definitely see you wanting to play this card. But I don't think it's the best removal because you already have to have a Majin Buu on board, and there is only really one really great target that we'll talk about in like a card or two that you can evolve into this for some value. And unless you're evolving it into that, it's not super worth it. I'm just going to tell you, it's the 1-drop Majin Buu. If you're evolving this off of the 1-drop Majin Buu, it's somewhere around like a 7, maybe a high 6. If you're evolving this off of like the 4s or the 5s, that feels terrible. You're just basically getting a downgrade from a card you already have. And in those scenarios, I would say this card is closer to a 5 or a 4. You really need to have 2 to 3 of the 1-drop Majin Buu for this card to really shine. It's a situational pick. I probably would include it just if you do have at least a couple Majin Boos, just because you never know when you need the removal. But it's far and away a pretty lackluster removal. Next up is Majin Buu Ghastly Rampage. So you'll never trigger this if all your energy is black, activate main. I could see maybe some players proving me wrong and doing it on turn 2 by charging 2 black, but you just won't have the consistency. You should just play it because it's a 2-drop 15k colorless that is a Majin Buu, which means it's searchable by a card that we're going to talk about, the 1-drop, in a minute. So yeah, definitely would include it in most of my decks. Am I really excited about it? No, I would give this Super Buu a 5. Next up is Demonic Scream Majin Buu. This card's actually quite sweet. 3-drop 15k is an okay stat line if we needed another attacker for whatever reason. What's really awesome about this card is if you do go up the Buu chain for, with say, the 5-drop 25k double strike and you dump your whole hand and for whatever reason you can't win the game, if this is the last card in your hand, you can restand that double striker and go in again for game. That makes it a really nice tech option for those kind of decks that are looking for an extra push. I would definitely play it as a really awesome tech one of in the decks. So for that reason, I'm going to give this card a 6. Next up is Majin Buu. Virtuous Demon is a 1-cost 5k. It looks at top 7 for a black Majin Buu and puts it in your hand. There are quite a lot of them in the set. Majin Buus are basically going to be the cards you splash in most of your decks, just as, you know, random odds and ends, curve fillers, and obviously finishers if you don't have anything better. It's one of the better cantrips in the set because, again, it does find finishers, and it digs pretty deep to find it, so I'm going to give this card a 6. Next up is Capricious Onslaught. This card basically gives any leader 10k for the battle, and then if you have a Majin Buu on board, you get to use it as a removal spell. So this card is really, really sweet. There's no leader restriction on this, so this is a 1-cost 10k with straight upside all the time. I would play this in every single deck if you have at least one Majin Buu, just because decks do want 1-cost 10ks to be able to combo with, and then again, it just does have the upside. So this card is just really solid overall. I'm going to give Capricious Onslaught a 7. Next up is Demonic Absorption. Just like with all of the other cards that we talked about in this cycle, it is just premium removal. It gets rid of everything, even if it is quite a high cost. If you open it and you are in Bibbidi, you are going to play it, so I'm going to give it a 7. It's very akin to the yellow one. It's almost identical, actually. Next up is Petrification, aka that guy's spitting. If your leader is black, it's a negate. Yes, you get the cold bloodlust effect on top of it, which is pretty sweet. Again, this is a negate. You're in Bibbidi, it's an 8. We give it negates 8s usually most of the time, unless they are like 3 or higher, like the Vegeta in the red video, just because they save your life. Oh man, we're not even going to talk about these. These are the desires, the Shenron desires. There's no Shenron leaders in this set. Divine Favor gets a 1, don't play it. Unexpected Recovery gets a 1, don't play it. They require a Shenron, guys. So next up is the first of our multicolored super combos, which is Nappa Demolition Man. All of the super combos, if you've seen any of my videos, they always get 8s because there's almost no reason for you to not play them, even if you're not in the colors, and these are exactly the same. These all have beneficial effects, so I will talk about some of the interesting things you can do with each of them that you may or may not be aware of, whether or not you've seen my super combos video discussing these cards at length. So Nappa is basically 2 super combos in 1 card. You'll combo with him, he'll come into play, you can combo with him again in the following battles afterwards, as long as he stays on board and doesn't get removed. Next up is Zamos, Sacred Disbelief. This is another super combo, so again, it's going to get an 8 from me. I think that all of the super combos, this is the best one. If your leader can play this in his on-color for the additional effect, please play this card. This card is incredible. So what this card does is it switches any of your opponent's battle cards or leader cards to rest mode when you combo with it. So this card is basically not only going to out-combo one of your opponent's guys, but it's either going to help you tap down blockers if used strategically to win the game. It's also going to negate another attack. And it can be very punishing if your opponent doesn't swing with their leader first. The extra card draw that you could potentially deny them off of this can actually just straight up win you the game. The card is incredible. Next up is Celestial Union Kefla. 4-drop, 19k critical is pretty decent rate because it's basically a 4-drop 20k at that point. The Union Patara might happen. Again, the commons for Kayla and Caulifla are pretty, easy to obtain, and they are pretty powerful, and you should be playing them anyway. When you play this card, though, this card gets dual attack, so this card is going to swing twice with crit, which is pretty nice. And then also it has that freeze ability that we talked about in the yellow video with Margarita and Android 17. So being able to freeze something on top of that is really good. This is a really, really strong rare. If you can definitely play it because you're in the colors, you should play it. Kefla is going to get a high 8 for me. She's really, really good. Next up is the boy, the Stance, hit in Cold Blood. So 7-drop for a 30k triple strike seems like a lot, but it does go down 1 cost for each blue and yellow card you have. I said red because I'm commonly playing this card in constructed in 3-color red, yellow, blue decks. So yeah, this card is a blue-yellow bomb, and if you are in these colors, you should play this card. When you play it, you basically switch your opponent's leader to the front side. So aside from having huge stats and triple strike and potentially coming out on turn 4, he basically shuts your opponent down, and depending on what leader they are, for example, if they're Bibbidi, you can actually just win the game because Bibbidi takes 2 life when they awaken. So, yeah, this card is incredible and is an amazing bomb, and it's going to get a 9 for me, and you should just play it if you can't afford it. It's not the easiest to splash, but if, again, you're in the colors, you play this card. Or at least if you're not in the colors, you try to make the colors work, so you play this card. Next up is SS4 Son Goku Saiyan Lineage. This is a solid 2-drop 15k if you play it on the front side, and it has a nice bit of utility and card draw when you awaken with it. It's just a really good inclusion, and if you're in the colors, I would definitely play it. So I'm going to give Goku a 7. Very similar to that grade is this Super Baby 2 Malignant Force. 2-drop 15k is obviously playable. Has this really sick activate battle where you can pay 2 and warp this card from your drop to be either a removal spell, push for game by negging your opponent's leader, or potentially blocking an attack. It's just really, really good utility. It's a little bit hard to pull off because, you know, obviously red, yellow is not one of the pushed colors in this set for pre-release, so there's less of these, but it is definitely still going to get a high 7 from me. It's just a very flexible card and useful in most scenarios. Celestial Moderator, it's going to get an 8. It's a super combo. It is pseudo removal. It can get you some extra card draw if you're playing cooler for whatever reason. It's solid. I think there are better ones in the cycle for pre-releases, but considering that you basically are going to get a random smattering, maybe 1 of each super combo, just play it. It doesn't have any really fancy bells or whistles like some of the other cards like Nappa, or it doesn't have any trick plays like Zamasu, but it is still just a good card because it can potentially remove a threat such as 1-drop red Frieza, or it can potentially just be used to push for killing a battle card or whatever have you. Next up is SS Son Goku Another Chance. This is a 4-drop 20k blocker with Revive, and when it comes into play, you basically do the Mass Saiyan, the Mysterious Warrior effect, where you choose 5 cost worth of things and get rid of them. This card is not so good in Constructed because there's no way to cheat it out. In pre-release, this is a bomb rare. It is a very, very strong card. I'm going to give this Goku an 8. Being able to blow up your opponent's board, have a blocker that protects your life, is a relevant body for attacking, and it has Revive, so you can do it again if you want to pitch the cards. This card is just dumb flexible. If this card could actually close out games easily on its own, I would easily give this card a 9. Next up is Android 16, Imperfect Assassin. So, Android 16 doesn't have any real evolve targets for his auto, other than himself, so most of the time you're playing this for a 4-cost 20k with blocker, which is okay. That is playable in my book. It is also a dual color and a 10k, so I'll take it. I'll give 16 a 6. Next up is Bionic Blitz. This is probably the second best super combo for limited, or maybe even the first over Zamasu, just because it negs your opponent a card. Super combos don't draw in this set, so having a 2-for-1 where you basically are going up 10k and your opponent is potentially going down 10k in their hand is a pretty huge swing. Most of the time, like I said, this is going to end up being like a 0 for 15 super combo, which is really powerful. Best used on defense. It's just a really strong and versatile card. Again, 8 from me. So let's talk about the first of the 2 Surge leaders in this deck, UI Goku. Again, we don't want this video to go on too long. Just don't do it. We're gonna give Goku a 3. There's not enough Invoker cards in the set. There's not enough extra cards in the set at low rarities for you to actually want to play this and make the Activate Battle worth it. So for the most part, you're not really drawing on the front most of the time. On the back side, you have the Thoughtseize ability if you're playing Universe 7, but again, your leader doesn't draw, and then obviously picking up multicolor cards doesn't really do much because most of the good ones are super rares, so it's really just not going to happen. I just would not recommend playing this Goku unless you have nothing else to play. Just stick to Android 17. He's a significantly better Invoker / blue leader for this set. Next up is Full Power Frieza, 100% Overdrive. Now we just start to get into the land of super rares where everything is just going to be getting high grades because they're just super pushed bombs. So this is a 30k triple strike for 5, which is nuts. And when you swing with it, it basically kills all of your opponent's battle cards, except for like the really high-end successor cards. It should just win you the game. There are ways to answer it. I mean, you can negate it, and then on your turn just play any of green's abundance of KO spells or any of the rare cycle of removal cards. Frieza's hard to beat. He's one of the hardest super rares to beat in Limited, but that does not mean that he is unstoppable, which is why I'm not going to give him a 10. Next up is Mecha Frieza Energy Blight. It's a check land. You obviously are going to play it because it's a 10k. That is a check land, so that's really good. Mecha Frieza, though, unlike Whis and Android 17 in the past, actually has a relevant effect where you basically are getting a 2-cost 15k attacker that negs your opponent's leader by 5k. So this card is actually pretty hard to block. It's basically like a 2-cost 20k, so it's a relevant attacker. It's just all-around solid card. Include it in all of your red/blue decks if you pull it. So I'm going to give Frieza a 7. Next up is Cooler Tyrannical Assault. Arrival cards are snapped and limited. This one's really no exception. The effect is not quite as good. Being able to shrink things by -10, you shrink 2 things by -10k, is decent, right? You can use it to potentially fog a turn. You can basically just blank 2 battle card attacks because your opponent's not going to spend the cards. And then you also get a 20k double striker out of it as well, which is very, very good. Being able to play this card as early as turn 1 is pretty snapped. Again, Arrival is just a really push mechanic. It's really broken and constructed, and it's even more so here. So I'm going to give Cooler an 8. Next up is UI Son Goku Energy Explosion. 6 cost is really steep. Again, you use your closing games out by 5, maybe 6 at the latest. Having the auto that lets you potentially untap up to 3 energy is pretty nice because you can pick the multicolor energy that you already have charged, send them to the drop, then use the auto to pick those same cards back up in active mode, so don't forget that, guys. So that's really good. 35k is an amazing stat line, and he basically gives the first card that connects double strike if it doesn't already have it. Just whenever a card deals damage, whether it's a battle card, a leader card, this Goku, or Catastrophic, which we'll talk about in a little bit, it's going to increase the damage. Again, it's a solid finisher if you're in the colors. I just think Invoker is a pretty weak strategy compared to other strategies, so I'm going to give Goku a 7. It's a good card. You'll probably play it. Most super rares are in this set, but Invoker is just too difficult to pull off reliably. You're mostly just paying this for its 6 cost 35k stat line with pseudo double strike. SSB Vegeta Inspired Technique. It's just a 3 cost 20k. I know it's a 19k, but it's for most of the time it's a 20k. It is just got Barrier and Deflect. Barrier is the only real relevant thing on here, and then obviously Invoker at least gives you a chance to try to play Invoker if you open Vegeta. It's just a solid 3 drop. There's nothing special. Invoker is just too hard to pull off at Limited. For some reason, they just put all of the support at the higher end rarities. So realistically, it's just not going to happen. You're just going to play it because it's a beat stick. I'm going to give Vegeta a low 7. Next up is Golden Frieza Sovereign Technique. This card is almost identical to Frieza in that it enables Invoker strategies. It's a rare again, so it doesn't really cut you any slack. Like, at least if this card was an uncommon, it might be more feasible to play Invoker. So it's a 3 cost 20k, which is what you're mostly playing it for, as the potential to draw you a red-blue multicolor extra card if you're Android 17 in the top of the cards. And then again, it enables Invoker. It's probably better than Vegeta, honestly. I'm going to give it a mid-7. Beerus Divine Obliterator Super Combo. This is probably the weakest super combo because you probably won't have too many red-blue multicolor energies besides Beerus himself, because I believe all the other ones are... I believe they're all rare and super rares for the most part, except for maybe like Tyranny's Cost, which we'll talk about in a little bit. So yeah, it's still a super combo. You're going to play it because it's 0 cost 10, but this is definitely the weakest one of the cycle. Yep, Tyranny's Cost. It's Divination. Divination usually shines in Magic in Limited. That's the format that it is most known for. Divination is just a great play to help you catch up. I will give Tyranny's Cost a 7. It's very akin to that, where if you are at parity or ahead, Tyranny's Cost can accelerate you into winning the game. The problem is if you're behind, it doesn't really do as much as Divination does to bring you back into the game in Magic, because board presence is literally everything in this game, because going face is just too strong in this game in general most of the time. Next up is Emperor's Death Beam. This card is nutso. So 3 cost, give any of your opponent's battle cards, ignoring barrier, minus 30k for the turn, and you can potentially draw you another red-blue multicolor extra card, which is unrealistic because they're all rares and super rares, and there's no real way to set them up outside of the top unless if you're Android 17. Yeah, you're just going to play this in everything. honestly, if you're in like a red-yellow deck, I would splash blue for the 1 symbol just to play Emperor's Death Beam. The flexibility to use this card in battle or on your main phase to kill almost everything in the format is nuts. This is just the best combat trick in the entire set when it comes to limited. Your opponent is just going to get blown out by this card if they just don't see it coming. I'm going to give Death Beam a 9. I usually don't give rares something that high, but it answers most cards. Most super rares in the set will swing and not realize you have Death Beam, and they go all in on it, and they just get blown out by a random Death Beam that they don't know you're holding up. Again, if you see at your pre-release someone's holding up 3 energy, 2 of it red, 1 of it blue, do not fall into Death Beam. The card is just, it's such a strong blowout that it will win you the game outright when used correctly. Next up is Royal Condemnation. This is basically negates anything for 4 energy if your leader is either the Surge Goku or Android 17, so most likely 17. Yeah, this card is really, really strong. It's busted with Invoker. If you actually can pull this off with Invoker, it feels like an 8. If you don't have Invoker and you're just 17, then the card is probably closer to, like, I'd say a 5. I mean, you're going to play it because the 4-cost counterspell when you're ahead basically slams the door on the game. You don't have to tap out. You can just proceed to just keep pressuring with 17 leader and any battle cards you have on board and just slam the door with this game or with this card. But it is really costly and it's very difficult to use, but it is very powerful nonetheless. Next up is Catastrophic Blow. I actually like this card a lot more than Condemnation. So I know that you would need to open the super rare Goku to be able to play this card for 1 with Invoker, which is its intended purpose. But it does give you this really sweet backup plan where if you have no battle cards, playing this card for 5 just deals 1 to your opponent's face. If you're an Android 17 and you are just having trouble closing the game, I would include this card not only because it's dual color energy, but I would include this because on the off chance that you get your opponent to 1, you can swing with something, combo everything on your board, and then if they take it, you obviously win, but then if they don't take it, you just Catastrophic and cheese the game. So for that reason, I'm going to give Catastrophic a 7, just because it's a cheesy way to win the game, and there isn't anything that anybody can do to stop it. So now we move on to, I believe, the last of the regular leaders. We'll talk about the reboot leaders a little bit later. We're going to be talking about Cell now. I think Cell is a perfectly fine leader. Being able to look at top 5 for any card is really powerful. Yes, he doesn't draw, but you have to understand all 3 effects on this card are good. He digs 5 deep for anything. He basically makes you have unparalleled consistency in a format where you desperately need it. Being able to guarantee having super rare bombs in your opening hand or by turn 2 is amazing. It allows you to set up a lot of crazy plays. On top of that, his backside is great. Basically, he has 2 triggers because he's a Surge leader. The first trigger basically guarantees you're not losing the game the next turn. So he basically gets a guaranteed 2 turns to live. And the other one, which is the more important one, I feel, is killing any of your opponent's cards and making them randomly discard a card from their hand. I would play Cell just for these 2 effects. It's just that good. Just like all the other leaders, Cell gets an 8 for me. It's largely going to depend on your pool and what you're lacking on what leader you're going to choose. Alright, so now onto the successor cards. Cell, Unthinkable Perfection. This card is snapped. If you aren't an Android leader, usually Jiro is going to be the one I think you're going to use for this card. If you can resolve this card's successor, it is auto game. Just straight up auto game. I'm going to give Cell somewhere between a high 9 and a low 10. If you actually pull it off, I don't see how you lose the game. There's, outside of Condemnation, there's not really any way to react to it. And you basically just get to choose anything out of your opponent's hand and then guarantee you're just going to get the W. They have to have a negate and then a hard removal for them to not lose on the next turn, or have Death Beam in hand for them to not just lose on the spot. It's very difficult to lose if you just resolve Cell correctly. Next up is Cell, Devourer of the Masses. This is a much easier successor card to pull off than people think it is. It is 25k, which is a good stat line. Easy successor. Kills anything, ignoring barrier. Makes your opponent discard a card, and then for whatever reason, if it leaves play for anything, doesn't matter, they kill it. And actually, no, it is only a skill. I'm sorry, my bad. If they're removed by a skill, you get to draw 3, which is really, really dope. Still, Cell, really, really good card. I'm going to give it an 8. Next up is Jiro, Progenitor of Terror. Again, It's going to be at 8. I would use this card primarily to find cards that either have synergy with setting up the drop. So you have the 1 cost rare Giro that picks up the 17 and 18 in your drop area and plays them, or I would just use it to deck thin and get rid of cards that you think are really, really terrible and you do not want to top deck in the later parts of the game. Android 13 Adamantine Avenger is next up. It is a 7 cost 30k double strike with successor for 2. Relatively easy successor to pull. Big stat line. Activate main is basically worthless. I'm going to give this card a low 7 to a high 6. It is an easy big body to resolve, but it doesn't really do much else. Hell's Super 17 Hellstorm Unleashed is a significantly better card. This card's really snapped, guys. So this is a 30k critical that makes you basically crit your opponent down to 4 life. And then every turn it swings, it draws you a card and taps 2 of your opponent's energy or all of their blockers. So yeah, they're not going to get a chance to do really much of anything to this card. This card is a strong 9. It doesn't outright win you the game on the spot like Cell does, but this card is really busted, and it wouldn't surprise me if this card is really busted and constructed. Excellent super rare. You should definitely try to build your deck around this card if you can. The next card is Super 17 Total Eclipse. This card's a common. It is a very easy successor to pull off. It has barrier. It's got a decent stat line, and it has a very similar effect to Hellstorm Unleashed like we just talked about. So being able to draw a card every time this card swings and tap an energy or a blocker or a battle card or whatever have you is really, really nice. And it's a common, so you're going to see a lot of these cards. I'm going to give Total Eclipse an 8. I think that you should definitely try to use this as your bread and butter successor card for most of your green and yellow decks. Next up is Thick Boy, Strength and Silence. 10 cost for a 40k quadruple strike is ridiculous, but you're never going to pull that off for 10. The auto almost doesn't even matter. The successor, it's possible. If you do get it off, you just kind of slam dunk win the game. I'm going to give Jiren a 7, largely because of his difficulty to get off. But if you do get him off, you should just win. Next up is Topo Mortality Surpassed, 6-drop 25k barrier. Again, easy successor card to get out. Kills anything when it either enters play or leaves play due to a skill. Really strong card, easy to resolve, good beater. Going to give Topo an 8 because he's just generically good always. Next up is Dispo, Unprecedented Speed. This is the easiest successor card to pull off. This card is actually snapped and constructed. So yeah, this card, you can get this card out as early as turn 1, turn 2. And it's just a 15k that draws you a card when it either enters the field or leaves due to a skill. Dispo seems at first glance like a really underwhelming super rare, but I would definitely play him in every deck that you get. Even a 4 cost 15k while underwhelming, at least it draws you a card if you were Jiren. So I'm going to give Dispo an 8. Next up is Thick Girl, Massive Love. She is a 4 cost 20k with Arrival. Again, Arrival's busted. It kills something on enter and leaves play, so Rebrand gets an 8 from me. Next up is Analaza. This is another check land. You're going to play it, and just like with Mecha Frieza that we talked about earlier, it does have a relevant effect where you can choose a green-yellow card in your hand and place it in the drop area, and then if your opponent's attacking, you can basically discard a super combo or any one of their 10k combos. So it basically trades up when you're tapped out. This card can potentially save you. It has niche uses, but again, saving your life is really important to me in most cases, so Analaza gets a 7. Cell Games Arena. I'll be honest with you. Just don't play it. The only reason I'm not going to give it a 1 or a 2 and I'm going to give it a 3 is because it's dual color, so it's energy fixing. So it's got that going for it. It's just not worth the effect at all. So now we move on to the last cards, which are going to be the reboot leaders, the iconic leaders, and then I'll say something about the secret leaders. So first up is Hit. Hit on the front is really good because he's punching above his weight. He can even hit backside leaders on his front side. Backside, he basically gets to pick up Spopovich. Every turn when he attacks, you get to draw a card and you get 5k. This activate main battle is absolutely stupid, though. You basically get to kill almost any relevant attacking threat by discarding a card from your hand once per turn. Hit is arguably the best leader to open in the entire set. I'm going to give Hit a 9. I don't see how you lose if you're Hit. I think he's the best leader. But considering initial reports are that the reboot leaders are 1 per 24 packs, you'll be lucky to see more than 1 or 2 of these at your pre-release in terms of pre-release leaders. So Hit is a rarity. Pulling him is the equivalent of pulling an SPR of a specific card, so don't rely on it or any of these cards that we're about to talk about. Next up is Beerus. Beerus is got a relevant removal effect on the front side. and also he draws a card. Can also draw a card, so he's pretty good there. Backside, I feel like the permanent actually hurts you quite a bit, unless you're trying to play Successor. I would actually try to play Beerus as a green-yellow deck because Successor might be hard to pull off, but he might actually get the ramp that makes it viable. So you have that going for you. Obviously, again, when he attacks, he has built-in removal, which can close out games, and then or additionally he could have a draw. I'm gonna give Beerus an 8. Again, just another solid addition to the leaders in this set. Next up is SS3 Son Goku. This feels like a worse version of Beerus. You have only a draw 1 on the Awaken, and yes, it does ramp you and get to cards quickly, but it can only go up to 6. Most of the relevant cards that are 6 are the Successor cards. So if you open a ton of Successor cards that are 6 drops, I could see you wanting to play SS3 if you open him. He's one of the 2 that I'd be very wary about playing. I'm going to give him a 7. I think that the other set leaders could be really good. I know he does get 5k on the back, but switching 3 cards to active mode and mono blue isn't really super impactful here. There's a lot less 10Ks. You're a lot less likely to be tapped out, and if you are tapped out, it's usually because your hand is all 5Ks. So again, I think Beerus and Hit are significantly better than him, and I would rather take Jiren and even Dr. Gero over him. Next up is Teen Gohan. Awakens super quickly, draws lots of cards really quick on the front side. Obviously gets in for 2 damage as well because he's got pseudo dual attack. The potential to have 3 times triple attack on this card is really busted. So you can swing at this leader, take 2 life, restand, awaken mid-combat, crit a life to give him triple strike and 10k, and then you can then swing with him again because he's untapped, and that's another triple strike, and then he has activate main, switch this card to active mode. Yeah, so he is just busted. Just like Hit, it's going to be a high 9. If you open this and you pull it off correctly, it's really hard for you to lose the game, I think. I think that Hit is generically all around a better leader and matches up really well. Gohan has this kind of like all-in play style, and if it doesn't work, you're going to lose. So I feel like Hit gets the nod there, but there's no denying that this is a really stupidly powerful leader. I could honestly see the case being made for this card being a 10. I could actually be wrong in my evaluation. This could actually be the best leader, but it's between Hit and Gohan. If you get either of those leaders, just play them. Trust me, they're just better than the other leaders in this set in terms of what they do. Next up is Multicolor. So the only real way to play Multicolor in this format is to play him as red-blue with a lot of Frieza cards. And you have to have a lot of the 4-drop mediocre Cooler Core. So that's the only real card you can draw with it is a mediocre 4-drop repeatedly. It does have this really sick activate main where you can lock down one of your opponent's cards in rest mode and it's just never coming back as long as you have 2 or more Frieza Clan cards on your board. And then obviously it can pump that mediocre battle card by 5k a turn. I think he's just really weak, honestly. Like, he's somewhere between like a 5 and a 6 if you're in the red-blue Frieza deck with a lot of stuff. And if you just aren't, if you don't have those cards, he's like a 1. Just don't play him. It's pretty underwhelming. It'd be pretty cool if you open it because, again, these leaders are hard to pull. So if you pull it, at least he's decent trade bait, right? All right, and lastly, we're going to move on to the iconic rares. So all these cards are 1-cost 15k combos if you are in the relevant color. They all have additional effects of all of your energy is the same color, so all red, all blue, all green. So the auto is not super likely outside of the first 2 turns unless you have you're really trying for it. The main takeaway is that these are all 1-cost 15k combos, so you are going to play them no matter what because of that. So they're all going to get a minimum of a 7, and Frieza is no real exception here. I think he's the second weakest of them. Shrinking something by 10k is nice, but I don't think it's just quite as good as some of the other options. Next up is Kamehameha. I like this one the most because it's the most versatile, and I think it gives you the most amount of bang for your buck in the intended leader. If you're playing this in 17, this card can potentially be a 20k or a 15k, or 25k, sorry, combo power because it lets you draw a card and as well as being a 15k on top of your leader already being double strike, critical, and 20k. It's really good at closing out the game there, and then obviously it keeps your energy open if you have multiple 10ks in your hand to be able to block, so you have a lot of multicolor cards in your deck. So I'm going to give Kamehameha an 8. Next up is Solar Kamehameha, which is the Cell one. If your leader is green, again, obviously 15k pump. This one is probably the most back-breaking effect, and I think this is the one that most people expect to be the best one. Your opponent just randomly discards a card if all of your energy is green. Based on when you deploy this, this could be really powerful and game ending. Again, this is really strong, just like the Goku Kamehameha, so I'm going to give it an 8. Next up is Vegeta's Final Flash. This one is also really strong. I think this is probably the third best one. This is definitely going to be a sideboard card also, by the way, in Constructed. So again, 15k combo power if all your leader is yellow. You basically get to negate all the skills on a card for the turn. So this is best used when your opponent is swinging at you with like a triple strike or something, and you just blank the triple strike and say, thanks, I'll take 1, and you kill them on the crackback because they expected to kill you with it. Again, just like Death Beam, this card can just steal games if your opponent just doesn't know you have it. So for that reason, I give Vegeta's Final Flash an 8. And then finally is Human Extinction Attack. If you're Bibbidi, this is going to be a 15k. Again, the other effect is not really relevant unless you are just really digging for those Majin Buu cards. Again, you're going to play it because it's a 1-cost 15k, which is pretty good for both pushing for game and defending your life, so it gets a 7. And finally, before we go, let us talk about the secret rares. All of them get a 10. They are all busted. If you can actually pull them off, there's no way you can lose the game for the most part. So, as always, the secret rares are just super pushed. If you get them, you should just play them if you're in the colors, period. So, that is it. Sorry for the long video, guys. Another limited review in the bags. Yeah, hopefully this helps you guys get all of the pluses at your pre-release. Helps you do well. If you're a Patreon, then keep in touch tomorrow. We're going to do the Android 21 sweet cheat sheet like I do every set, which will give you guys the 5 best common/uncommons in the set, so that way you can kind of take it with you to your pre-release and kind of have like a reference guide to reference back to the cards that we talked about in these videos. If you're not a Patreon already and you're considering subscribing, then yes, I'll leave the links for that down in the description below. Really great group of community of people. We have a huge Discord with a huge community, always trying to help players accomplish their goals. So if you're interested, definitely check us out. Matt and Zapp did an excellent overview of everything we have to offer at 3XG Productions. I will also link that down in the description below as well. So if you are looking to figure out just exactly what being a patron of ours entails and what you get out of it, and you want to join the Scrub fam, because that's what we are a family, then definitely again, check us out. Enjoy your pre-release, guys. Hopefully your pulls are blessed. They're amazing. Stay safe. Have a great weekend. And I'll catch you guys for Draft Box 5 with the next limited review in just about a month. Okay, bye!